Greetings, and welcome back to the channel as we continue to delve into the world of science fiction cinema. Today, I'll look back at the year that was 1938, an improvement over the forgettable films of the previous year. This year will be better remembered for inspiring future filmmakers and comic book writers than for its groundbreaking cinema. We'll see the early inspirations for Spider-Man, Darth Vader, and Superman. On January 21st, science fiction's first director, Georges Méliès, passed away at the age of 76. I covered several of his films throughout this series, including A Trip to the Moon, The Impossible Voyage, and The Conquest of the Pole. Méliès' influence on science fiction cinema extends beyond his technical innovations. His imaginative storytelling and fantastical themes laid the foundation for the genre, inspiring future filmmakers to explore the possibilities of science fiction on screen. The animated short film, Scrappy's Trip to Mars, follows the characters Scrappy and Opie as they dream of taking a rocket trip to Mars. Their journey is presented like a dream that pays homage to a trip to the moon, a fitting way to continue the legacy of early science fiction in the sound era. In the 1930s, crime, murder, and mystery captivated audiences, with Agatha Christie's novels leading the bestseller list. Additionally, H.C. McNeill, writing as Sapper, drew on his experiences as a World War I veteran to create a series of novels and stage plays featuring Bulldog Drummond, a sophisticated yet adventurous British gentleman who used his military expertise gained during the war to tackle crime. The success of McNeill's first novel, Bulldog Drummond, published in 1920, spawned a film series that spanned from the 1920s to the 1960s. Arrest Bulldog Drummond is an American crime thriller from Paramount Pictures. It is one of those sci-fi films from this time that is only counted in this genre because of the futuristic weapon used by the villain. This is the 15th Bulldog Drummond film, but you don't have to watch the previous ones to get the general gist of the characters. From director James P. Hogan, who directed other installments in this series. He is best known on this channel as the director of the bizarre 1935 film Life Returns, about a scientist who brings his son's dog back to life. Mystery novelist and screenwriter Stuart Palmer wrote the screenplay. Starring John Howard, whose prolific career in film and television ranged from 1940's The Philadelphia Story to guest starring in TV series from the 1970s, Little House on the Prairie, and The Rockford Files. Howard would star in 7 of the 15 Bulldog Drummond films. Joining him is Heather Angel as his patient fiancée and Reginald Denny as Algie. In this story, the British detective Bulldog Drummond is about to marry his fiancée Phyllis when he becomes embroiled in a murder investigation. His friend Dr. Gannett is killed, and Drummond is the chief suspect. The wedding is called off so Bulldog can avoid the police and find the real killer. Dr. Gannett was the inventor of a powerful weapon, and after his death the invention is stolen, prompting Bulldog Drummond to delve into the mystery with the help of his eccentric friend Algie. Together, they must uncover the identity of the murderer, known as the Stinger, who employs a stinger from a stingray as his method of murder. The Stinger is now in possession of the death ray and will use it for his nefarious plans. There is an obvious pre-James Bond feel to the story, and Ian Fleming was influenced by the series when creating his infamous character. I wasn't particularly blown away by this film. This hour-long film felt like an episode of television rather than a feature. Arrest Bulldog Drummond is available on DVD and streaming on Tubi TV in the United States. It is also available on YouTube and the Internet Archive, which I'll link in the description below. Before continuing with the films of 1938, if you're enjoying the content, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more History of Sci-Fi episodes. I've also started a Patreon, which I'll link in the description below. Your support is what keeps this channel thriving, and I'm thankful for everyone stopping by and sharing the love for this amazing genre. I want to briefly discuss Flight to Fame, an American action film with some science fiction elements from Columbia Pictures. Unfortunately, this is one of those rare times I was unable to find a copy for a review. There are no DVDs for sale, nor is it available for streaming. Hopefully a copy will become available in the future, and I'll be able to make an addendum to this episode. So I'll have to rely on online and book sources for information about the film. IMDb's short description reads, quote, "An evil villain steals a newly inventive death ray," unquote. Starting with the working title, Wings of Doom, it was changed to Flight to Fame for release. Directed by Charles C. Coleman, Flight to Fame stars Charles Farrell as Captain Robert Lawrence. Julie Bishop co-stars as Barbara Fisk, and Hugh Southern as Dr. Harlan Fisk. Michael Pitts wrote about the film in his book, Columbia Pictures Horror, Science Fiction, and Fantasy Films, 1928 to 1982, discussing how the flying stunts were created by aviator Paul Mantz, a famed stunt pilot who also worked on the aerial sequences for many films, such as Airmail. Pitts provided a short description of the film, describing a scientist, Harlan Fisk, who creates a death ray, but when presenting the invention to the War Department, it fails. Captain Robert Lawrence's plane is shot down by a device like the one created by Fisk. There's the usual drama, and in the end, our heroes must fight off the power of the death ray while up in the air. This is now the fourth film I've covered for this series involving death rays and airplanes. Hollywood loved this theme in the 1930s. The death ray in this film was developed for the good of mankind, but of course, it gets into the wrong hands and is used to thwart our hero. If you find a copy of the film, please let me know, and I'll add an addendum to this episode. Universal Pictures found such success with the 1936 Flash Gordon hit, a sequel was greenlit and premiered in 1938. Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars, an action-adventure sci-fi serial, picks up right where the original left off. The popular comic strip character, created by Alex Raymond in 1934, returns with former Olympic medalist Buster Crabbe in the starring role.
Earthman, you have defied the Imperial Ming, and for that you shall die.
Gene Rogers also returns as Dale, along with Charles B. Middleton, Frank Shannon, and Richard Alexander. New to the cast are Beatrice Roberts as Queen Azura and Donald Kerr as Happy Hapgood. This time around, Ford Beebe and Robert F. Hill direct the 15-episode serial. Beebe would go on to work on Buck Rogers in 1939, and Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe in 1940. The sequel to the smash 1936 serial was based on the comic strip character, as well as 1936's Big Little Book adaptation of Flash Gordon and the Witch Queen of Mongo. The plot is fairly similar to the first, though it seems like they're trying to take this a little more seriously. We pick up right where the serial left off, as Flash, Dale, and Dr. Zarkov return to Earth, believing the planet is saved, and Ming the Merciless is dead. This time around, they must travel to Mars, and once again take on the evil Emperor Ming and his plans for conquest. Ming, who somehow survived the last serial, allies with Queen Azura, who possesses a powerful weapon capable of destroying Earth. Flash and his friends encounter various challenges, including the Clay People and a deadly neutron ray. With the help of allies like Prince Baron, they try to save the Earth and Mars from Ming's tyranny. The original serial's budget was $350,000, and this time around they had about half the original amount. It was a box office success, though not as much as the first, with some decent visual effects, costume, and set design. The costumes in this sequel, especially for the women, were toned down this time due to Hays Code's concerns. Dale somehow found a hairstylist on the trip home between the original and the sequel, and her blonde hair is now brunette, to be more in line with her comic strip counterpart. Flash has more dialogue this time, and Dale, thankfully, doesn't act as much like a damsel in distress. Both are more intelligent and active in the story.
Take him to the disintegrating room.
Universal released the serial on March 21st, and a feature-length version in October. And some fascinating trivia. The action-packed musical score borrowed from The Invisible Man and Bride of Frankenstein, both Universal properties. We'll see Flash again in 1940 with Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe.
My work here is finished.
Finished? Your Earth has not heard the last of me yet. I'll not stop until it lies a useless cinder in the universe.
Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars is available on DVD and streaming for free on YouTube. I'll link the serial playlist in the description below. George Lucas pulled from many sources of inspiration for his space opera Star Wars. The American 12-episode serial, The Fighting Devil Dogs, from Columbia Pictures, played a small role in developing the classic from 1977. The villain, known as the Lightning, is not only an early use of a masked villain in American film, but his costume also paved the way for the attire worn by everyone's favorite evil dad, Darth Vader. This supervillain action sci-fi hybrid from directors William Whitney and John English is definitely my favorite of the films I reviewed for this episode. Whitney would later say that he thought this was his worst serial, but I thought it was a big improvement over SOS Coast Guard, which I discussed in my previous episode. Whitney is best known today as the director who changed how fight choreography was broken down and filmed. He also worked on The Lone Ranger this year. And John English co-directed with Whitney in serials like Zorro's Fighting Legion. Lee Powell stars as Tom Grayson, who was also the first actor to play the Lone Ranger. Powell's career would be cut short after joining the Marines during World War II, where he was killed in action in the Pacific Theater. Joining him is Herman Brix, a former medalist turned actor who played the title character in The New Adventures of Tarzan, and I reviewed his previous film, Skyrocket, in 1937. Also starring is former vaudeville actor Montague Love and Eleanor Stewart as Janet. The story begins in Singapore, where Marine Lieutenants Tom Grayson and Frank Corby, while on a mission, find a mansion full of bodies with no apparent cause of death. Tom and Frank barely make it out alive when the lightning attacks. This masked terrorist wields terrible lightning-based weapons to pursue his evil plans of world domination. He obliterates their Marine unit and would later murder Tom's father. Tom and Frank are aided by scientists and a Marine general in the investigation, and somehow inside information keeps getting back to the villain. Who is the mole? There are plenty of suspects. Determined to thwart the Lightning's sinister agenda, our heroes vow to apprehend the Lightning and guarantee justice prevails. Even though there are 2 recap chapters, I didn't feel like they were too forced like in most serials. The writers find a clever way to incorporate past footage into chapters 7 and 11.
I'll tell you all I know.
Gentlemen, I think we should review this case so that everyone may be brought to date on the matter. Lieutenant.
With a budget of almost $95,000, they spent their money wisely, with good visual effects and set design, taking advantage of the popular theme of aviation in the 1930s. The filmmakers also saved some money by reusing outdoor scenes from 1937's SOS Coast Guard. It was nice to see sci-fi weapons that are important to the story and not just MacGuffins to kick the plot into action. And I like that the main characters are Marines instead of the usual detectives fighting gangsters. Sure, there are lots of fistfights with the villain's henchmen, but there are also futuristic airplanes, submarines, and weapons. The Lightning was a cool villain that brought a level of danger to the story. The Fighting Devil Dogs would be released as a feature in 1942 and aired on television as Torpedo of Doom. The Fighting Devil Dogs 12-episode serial is available on DVD, Blu Ray, and for free on YouTube. I'll link it in the description below. I recommend checking it out. The Gladiator is an American comedy, fantasy, sci-fi hybrid from Columbia Pictures. This story is about Hugo Kipp, an average everyman who is fired from his job and returns to college after stumbling his way into an unexpected source of money. And of course, he winds up becoming an early version of the superhero we know today. From director Edward Sedgwick, an actor, writer, and director who worked with Buster Keaton on many of his MGM films and is also known for helming the 1925 film The Phantom of the Opera. Starring Joe E. Brown as an unlikely hero, Hugo Kipp. He is recognizable to movie lovers as Osgood Felding III in Some Like It Hot. June Travis stars as his love interest, Iris Bennett, with Dickie Moore and Lucien Littlefield in supporting roles. Man Mountain Dean plays himself as the wrestler who fights Hugo. After joining the football team to impress a girl, Hugo is ridiculed for his lack of athletic abilities. He complains to his neighbor, who just happens to be a scientist who spends his time experimenting with a serum to enhance human strength. Hugo becomes an unwilling participant in the experiment. Hugo transforms into a campus sensation and a football hero. Encouraged by his newfound abilities, he enters a wrestling match. But the drug's effects are fleeting, jeopardizing his chances of victory. Hugo manages to secure a win despite his diminishing strength. Very loosely based on the 1930 novel Gladiator by Philip Wiley, best known as the co-writer of When Worlds Collide. The novel, though darker in tone than the film, was one of the inspirations for the character of Superman, who would make his first appearance in comics in 1938.
Do you know that an ant can lift 50 times its weight and a grasshopper can leap 100 times its height? Why not man?
This film is charming and heartwarming, with Joe E. Brown in the lead playing an average guy who briefly gets to be a superhero. The Gladiator is available on DVD and streaming on YouTube. I'll link it in the description below. Some films are groundbreaking on their own, and some inspire future creators. The Spider's Web, a 15-chapter American serial from Columbia Pictures, served as one of Stan Lee's inspirations for the iconic character, Spider-Man. This was the first serial to be adapted from a pulp magazine character and was created by Harry Steger in 1933 to compete with The Shadow. The film version turned out to be profitable for Columbia, though the violence from the pulp version was toned down when adapted into film due to Hays Code's concerns. The Spider's Web was directed by James W. Horn and Ray Taylor. Horn was a prolific director who worked with Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy, while Taylor would go on to work on Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe in 1940. Warren Hull, who we saw in The Walking Dead from 1935, and Night Key from 1937, stars as Richard Wentworth, a secret vigilante known as the Spider. He battles against the Octopus, a criminal mastermind intent on plunging society into chaos. Wentworth appears charming in his civilian life, but as the Spider, he employs ruthless tactics to get to the bottom of the octopus's criminal world. And when the costume can't get the job done, Wentworth adopts another disguise to infiltrate the criminal underworld and gather intelligence. Only a select few, including his fiancée and a trusted servant, are aware of his many identities, setting the stage for future stories on film about men who wear masks to fight crime. This serial wasn't as good as Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars or The Fighting Devil Dogs, but it was fun to see the early tropes of the masked vigilante, masked henchman, a villain who loves to monologue, and main characters with secret identities. It is meandering at times and could have been cut down to 12 episodes to tighten up the story. Warren Hall would return as the title character in The Spider Returns in 1941. The Spider's Web serial is available on DVD, as well as for free on YouTube and the Internet Archive. I'll link it in the description below if you would like to check it out. The golden age of science fiction was a period of immense innovation and creativity, with its origins subject to debate among scholars. While some argue it began in 1937 with John W. Campbell Jr.'s elevation to editor of Astounding Science Fiction magazine, while others suggest it started as early as 1934 in response to the rise of campy sci-fi films and comic strips like Flash Gordon. By 1938, the early stages of this golden age were evident, and the genre continued to flourish in novels and pulp magazines, though not in film. Cinema's golden age was still over a decade away. Several influential novels and short stories were published this year, though most were never adapted into film. Arthur C. Clarke published the short story How We Went to Mars in Amateur Science Stories magazine. C.S. Lewis's Out of the Silent Planet and Rule 19 by Clifford D. Simak also entranced readers. Ray Bradbury published his first story, Holleboken's Dilemma, in the fanzine Imagination. H.P. Lovecraft's Azathoth, though written in 1922, was published as a fragment this year. This was the first mention of Azathoth, who would become a major entity in Lovecraft's sci-fi and horror hybrid Cthulhu mythos. Robert Heinlein's For Us the Living was written in 1938, though the work was not published until 2003. One science fiction work, beyond its influence on the genre itself, found its way into the world of feature films. The novella Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr. stands as a cornerstone of the science fiction horror hybrid in literature. The narrative follows a crew that uncovers an alien capable of assimilating any living organism. It inspired multiple adaptations, but two notable ones stand out: 1951's The Thing from Another World, and a more faithful adaptation, the 1982 film John Carpenter's The Thing. One notable creator born this year influenced future authors and filmmakers. Larry Niven was born on April 30th. He is known for his hard science fiction approach, using scientific concepts and theoretical physics in his stories. And his most famous work, the 1970 novel Ringworld, as well as its sequels, are set in Niven's known space future history. And one writer, who's been mentioned several times in this series, passed away on December 25th at the age of 48 from pneumonia. Karel Čapek, the influential Czechoslovakian author, credited with coining the term robot in his 1920 play, R.U.R., Rossum's Universal Robots, is known as one of his country's greatest writers, delving into themes of technological misuse, scientific advancement, and societal unrest in works like R.U.R. and The War with the Newts. In 1938, the world experienced a series of significant historical events, mainly in Europe and Asia, with far-reaching consequences globally. History is interconnected with culture, science, the arts, and film. Everything is influenced by, as well as influences, the course of events. Therefore, examining science fiction films from any era compels us to understand the broader context of the world at the time. In the remainder of this episode, I'll explore key historical, cultural, and cinematic events that unfolded in 1938. Beginning in March, the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany, known as the Anschluss, solidified Adolf Hitler's control over Central Europe and underscored the failure of the international response to Nazi aggression. Western powers, adopting a policy of appeasement, proved ineffective in deterring Hitler's expansionist ambitions, allowing him to push forward with his aggressive agenda. On May 5th, the Vatican recognized Francisco Franco's government in Spain. Czechoslovakia ordered a partial mobilization on May 20th along the German border, though tensions lessened within a few days. Additionally, the signing of the Munich Agreement in September further exacerbated tensions in Europe. This agreement, negotiated between Britain, France, Italy, and Germany, allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia in exchange for promises of peace. While future Prime Minister Winston Churchill condemned the agreement, the current Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain triumphantly proclaimed it peace in our time. As diplomatic efforts faltered, the world continued to grapple with the escalations of tension in Asia, particularly with Japan's aggressive expansion in China during the Second Sino-Japanese War. These events not only foreshadowed broader conflicts in the Pacific Theater during World War II, but also contributed to growing global instability. Kristallnacht, also known as Night of Broken Glass, was a coordinated attack against Jews throughout Nazi Germany from November 9th to the 10th, destroying businesses, synagogues, and homes, as well as leading to the arrest of thousands of Jews. On January 2nd, 1939, Adolf Hitler was named Time magazine's Person of the Year for 1938, reflecting his dominant influence on global affairs and the ominous trajectory of Nazi Germany. Time magazine said of their controversial choice, quote, Hitler became in 1938 the greatest threatening force that the democratic, freedom-loving world faces today. The cultural landscape of this time was marked by several events, some of which carry a lasting impact today. Several notable pieces of literature were published. Ayn Rand's novella, Anthem, presented a dystopian world where individuality is suppressed, challenging conventional ideas of collectivism and individual freedom. On a different note, Edith Wharton's posthumously published novel, The Buccaneers, offered a captivating tale of American heiresses seeking love and fortune in British aristocracy. Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca captivated readers with its haunting tale of love and betrayal, weaving a suspenseful narrative set against the backdrop of a grand estate shrouded in mystery, while T.H. White's The Sword in the Stone introduced readers to the enchanting world of King Arthur and Merlin, blending elements of fantasy and adventure to create a timeless classic beloved by readers of all ages. The publication of the first issue of Action Comics marked a historic moment in the world of comic books, introducing readers to the iconic superhero, Superman. Created by writer Jerry Siegel and artist Joe Shuster, Superman's debut in Action Comics #1 revolutionized the genre, establishing the superhero archetype and laying the foundation for the entire superhero comic book industry.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the Air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
On October 30th, Orson Welles' radio adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds caused confusion and controversy, as listeners who turned in late mistook the fictional broadcast for a real alien invasion. Presented as a series of news bulletins, it demonstrated the power of mass media, prompting debates about the influence and responsibility of broadcasters. But evidence today suggests that the belief in a nationwide panic caused by the broadcast is largely exaggerated. The audience for the radio play was relatively small, while most of the country was listening to a different popular radio program that evening. Some technological innovations and scientific events that affected the world ranged from the mundane to the politically game-changing to out of this world. On April 6, Roy J. Plunkett, working for DuPont, accidentally discovered Teflon, marking a significant breakthrough in the field of materials science. The first patent for the ballpoint pen was filed this year in France. On June 28th, a 450-ton meteorite crashed near Chicora, Pennsylvania. This generated widespread curiosity and scientific interest as experts rushed to study the remnants, capturing the imagination of the public and serving as a reminder of the dynamic and unpredictable nature of the universe. The discovery of nuclear fission on December 17th revolutionized physics, paving the way for the development of nuclear energy and profoundly impacting scientific understanding. This discovery marked a turning point in the study of atomic structure and set the stage for the advent of nuclear technology, shaping the course of scientific research and geopolitical dynamics for decades to come. This year, Hollywood faced several challenges, including a decline in public attendance in theaters and negative publicity surrounding stars who are now considered box office poison. These once box office draws were actors whose films now consistently performed poorly at the box office, led to a decline in their popularity and marketability in the film industry. To counter these setbacks, the industry launched the ambitious Motion Pictures Greatest Year campaign to excite audiences, but it ultimately fell short of its goals. There were successful films in 1938, though nowhere near the classics we'll see in 1939, which would go on to become one of the greatest years in film history. To make matters worse, the U.S. Department of Justice sued the major movie studios, known as the Big Five. The lawsuit accused the studios of controlling various aspects of the industry, leading to a monopoly and unfair treatment of independent filmmakers. It would take 10 years of legal proceedings and a U.S. Supreme Court ruling against the movie studios for changes to be made. Their practices would eventually be found in violation of antitrust laws, which would prompt significant changes in the film industry. In January, Judy Garland was cast as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Filming would begin in October. Though a classic today, the groundbreaking film would fail to make a profit upon its initial release in 1939. Some classic film serials from this year include Dick Tracy Returns from Republic Pictures, starred Ralph Byrd as the iconic detective as he deals with the ruthless Paul Stark. Despite being the most expensive Republic serial of 1938, Dick Tracy Returns proved successful, leading to the release of 2 more sequels in 1939 and 1941. The debut of The Lone Ranger, also from Republic Pictures, follows the masked hero and his faithful companion as they fight injustice in the Wild West. This iconic serial captivated audiences with its action-packed scenes and timeless message of heroism and integrity. The 11th Academy Awards for the films of 1938 were held on February 23, 1939, and honored You Can't Take It With You as Best Picture. This comedy, starring Jean Arthur, Lionel Barrymore, and James Stewart, was directed by Frank Capra and follows an eccentric family as their unconventional lifestyle clashes with the expectations of the wealthy parents of their daughter's fiancé. Frank Capra would win his 3rd Best Director Oscar for the film. Spencer Tracy won his second Best Actor Oscar in a row, this time for Boys Town. Bette Davis won Best Actress for Jezebel. Jean Renoir's The Grand Illusion became the first non-English language film to be nominated for Best Picture. And once again, there were no science fiction films nominated for the Oscars. Some influential or popular films released in 1938 include Alexander Nevsky, from famed Soviet director Sergei Eisenstein. This historic epic, depicting the legendary Russian prince's defense of Novgorod against invading Teutonic knights in the 13th century, culminated in the iconic Battle on the Ice scene, all set to Sergei Prokofiev's score, marking it as a stirring portrayal of heroism and a potent piece of Soviet propaganda against the backdrop of rising tensions in Europe. Boys Town, directed by Norman Taurog, portrays the inspirational true story of Father Edward J. Flanagan's creation of a home for troubled youth, emphasizing the power of love and discipline in transforming young lives. Starring Spencer Tracy in his Academy Award-winning role as Father Flanagan. From director Victor Fleming, Test Pilot follows the thrilling adventures of a daring pilot, played by Clark Gable, as he navigates the dangers of testing new aircraft, balancing his dangerous career with his relationships, including a romance with a fellow flyer, played by Myrna Loy, and a friendship with his mechanic, played by Spencer Tracy. The Adventures of Robin Hood is a classic swashbuckling adventure starring Errol Flynn as the legendary outlaw Robin Hood. Set in medieval England, the film follows Robin's daring exploits as he robs from the rich to give to the poor. Directed by Michael Curtiz and William Keighley, the film's timeless tale of justice and heroism continues to captivate audiences. Jezebel stars Bette Davis in her Oscar-winning role as a headstrong Southern belle who defies societal norms, causing scandal and heartbreak in antebellum New Orleans. Directed by William Wyler, the film looks at love, redemption, and the consequences of defiance in a society bound by tradition. And lastly, Bringing Up Baby, a screwball comedy directed by Howard Hawks, starring Katharine Hepburn as a flighty heiress and Cary Grant as a befuddled paleontologist, whose lives intertwine in a series of madcap misadventures involving a leopard named Baby. Cinema as a whole was on the verge of great changes in 1938, as color cinematography was about to begin its takeover of Hollywood. One of the greatest years in film history was on the horizon, but science fiction films would be left behind. Sci-fi literature was still moving forward, though only small steps were being taken on the silver screen to push the genre. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more history of sci-fi content. And in the next episode, we'll close out the decade with the sci-fi films of 1939.